Hello everyone and welcome to practical 5 exercise 1. In this practical we expected from you to, as you can see this form here, if you click the dice, two random values are going to be assigned, and then if the same numbers are or actually occurs, then for example if both dice are thrown and it's a 1 and a 1, you win 100,000 rand. It's a gambling program. You gamble, okay? And if you throw two twos, you also get 100,000, and the same goes to uh, 3, 4, and 5. So if you have two ones, uh, two twos, two threes, two fours, and two fives, you win 100,000 rand. Okay, cool. Or dollars or whatever. Okay, cool. If it's two sixes, however, you win 1,000,000 rand. Okay, cool. If it's not either of those, which we will be testing in if statements, um, we are taking the sum of the two numbers together. Okay, so if you throw a 1 with one dice and a 2 with another dice, then it's total of 3. So 1 plus 2 is 3, and then in order to actually know if it's a 3, 7, 9, or 11, if you look at your practical, the what is expected of you, what is asked, then you can see that if it's 3, I think, let me just check here. I don't have the PDF open in front of me, as you can see, obviously. Okay, so if it's 3, then it's 1,000. If it's 7, then you lose 10,000. If it's 9, it's 5,000, and if it's 11, you also win 10,000. Okay, cool. So you saw a sneak peek here that we are going to do a switch statement. Okay, cool. But that's for later. First, as you can see, I already programmed the code. Okay, and I thought this week, to keep the video short, I'm just going to write the comments in while I'm explaining what I did and why I did it. Okay, cool. So let's begin. As you can see here, I declared a global variable because it is outside of the click event. Okay, cool. So we say here declare global variable. Cool. So the reason we do this is, and the reason we also assign 0 to the total, to the integer, is because we are going to use that integer throughout the whole program, or not technically the program, but throughout this whole click event. And the total will change values between different if statements and even in the switch statement. So that's why we declare a global variable. Otherwise, the value of that variable, which you declared here, is going to be static. And another thing, if you copy this, or if you put this piece of code, if you declare that inside, if you declare it inside the click event handler, every time you click that button, you are going to reset the total to 0. And we don't want that. We want a continuous flow of adding and removing values to a certain amount. And it's cumulative. Okay, so that's why we don't declare it inside the click event handler, but outside. Okay, cool. I'm gonna delete this. This is not necessary. Okay, cool. In sum, I declared this. It's actually for later when we are going to use. Okay, so as you can see here, we already have errors. I will fix that as I explain to you guys now. That was then okay. So I'm not gonna stress about that now. I'm first gonna explain it from the top. Okay, so in sum is what I explained for you guys. When you roll two dice and you add the values of the two different random values that you get. So if you throw one dice and it's a 4, and another dice and it's 5, then you get 9. And if the sum is 9, then you win 5,000 rand or whatever. Okay, cool. So that's why I declared sum. All right. So let me just say here, declare variables. Oh, variables. There we go. Oh, and again, guys, there's a lot of different ways on doing this. If it works, it's not wrong. We will mark it. If it works, if we can see that you actually produce the output that we expect, you will get the marks. You will receive all the marks that you can get. There's no right or wrong way, but we just want to see through your comments what your thought process was while programming this solution. Okay, cool. Carrying on. Now, we want random numbers to be assigned to each dice. Okay, to do that, you need to create a random object. So let me just say that. Okay, cool. In order to do that, to create a new object, you say random because we are using the random class. But we're not doing classes now. You will do that later on. But for now, just know that this turquoise text color random is a class. As you can see there, class system.random. That means it's a random class. And then this is the name of the random object that you create. This can be anything. That can be RND, my random object, my random number, or anything that you desire to make it more clear that you know what you're doing throughout your program. And then obviously you just end it through saying new and then random with brackets. Okay, cool. After we have done that and creating the new object, we declare and assign two new dice values. Okay, so I'm gonna say that declare. Man, my spelling tonight. Declare and assign random value. Declare. Okay, no wait. So I'm gonna say declare integer int variable. Sorry, man. So declare int variable and assign random value to it. So this is how you comment, guys. So this is how you have to think about what you're doing. Okay, cool. So if I say int dice1, that's the variable, and then I assign this piece of code. Oh man, this piece of code that I'm highlighting now is basically creating a new random number and assigning it to this variable. Cool. And then you literally just added a random number to your dice1. Okay. Exact same thing, dice2, create a random number for that variable. Okay, cool. And it's in your lecture slides, and the lecturers also went through it with you guys in the class this week. The 1,7. So 1,7 means it starts at 1. So any random number between 1 and the maximum of 7, meaning that's the boundary. So it can only go from 1 up until 6. The reason for this we can't explain. It's unique to C#, but it starts from 1 and it goes up until 6. So just be careful with this, guys. If you say 1,6, it will only be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a random number between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. So this comment is basically it's the same thing, but we can I'm just gonna do this. Okay. All right. Now, as you can see that I explained earlier, this sum is where you calculate the sum of the two random numbers or values given to each dice, or assigned. Let's use programming language. Assigned to each dice. Alright, cool. So this is for later. That's for the switch case, but we need to do that now before we can actually do the switch later on. Alright, I'll explain the switch later on. It's because it's new and I want you to understand it perfectly. It's a very cool thing to know in C#, and you can actually use it at like a lot of places. All right, moving on. Since we have created a random number here and assign it to dice 1 and 2, we want, obviously the user wants to know, okay, cool, so what's the output? What's the results after I click the dice and I'm rolling the dice? So in this case, we want to show the user that dice 1 is equals to this, which is the random number, and also dice 2, which is this random number here. Alright, cool. So for this, what I did is, okay, so my two labels are named LBL final result and final result 2, 1 and 2. Alright, so as you can see here, it's on, that is LBL final result 1, and this is LBL final result 2. So we're not using these two labels. As you can see, it's 4 labels in total, but this label and that label is static. That value is never going to change. We are only using these two labels, which is LBL final result 1 and result 2. Okay, cool. So as you ought to know by now, we have a integer value of dice 1 and 2, which we want to display in the labels control, the label control. Alright, to do that, you say dice1.toString and dice2.toString. Okay, cool. So let me just say here, display dice values in labels, label controls. That's better. Sweet. Okay. Now we come to the fun part of the program. So now we actually want to test, is that label equals to that label? Because we want to check if you throw the dice, is dice 1 and 2 equal? So if you throw the 2 dice, is it 1 and 1? Is it 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 4 and 4, or 5 and 5? If that's the case, you need to check it or test it with this if statement. So then you say LBL final result 1.text, which is that label, is equal to LBL final result 2.text, which is that label. And ultimately, the values will be sometime after clicking 100 times, the values will sometime be, actually it will be the same value. So then you test, is it true? Okay, cool, yeah it is. If you throw the dice and it's 2 2s, then you win 100,000 Rand, which I think is not bad by throwing 2 dice. But anyways, moving on. So now in the comment we can say test if the 2 dice values are the same. Okay, cool. So, and here we said add 100,000 to the total, which it means the pot. Okay, so you can keep on throwing until you lose or win or whatever, but at some point you are going to plus 100,000, plus 1,000, minus 5,000, plus 10,000. So that means the total amount. All right, cool. So add 100,000 to the total. Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, cool. So that is basically this little if statement here, this code, all right, is basically to test, as I just said now, if the two numbers are equal, and you want to test it, and actually if it's true, then add 100,000 Rand to your gamble pot, or whatever you call it, your accumulative winnings. There we go. All right. Now the second if statement, or the else if, as you can see here, this is to test if the two numbers that's randomly allocated through doing this, the random creating objects and assigning random values, is to test if both of those results are equal to 6. Okay, if it is, so let me just say test sorry, test if the two dice values are equal to 6. Okay. All right. And if it's true, if this switch if statement is true, add 1,000,000 to your pot, your accumulative winnings. Yes. Okay, cool. So that was basically just checking what the numbers are that you provided or added to your dice, that variables that you declared here. Okay, cool. Moving on. As you can see, I put my switch case inside the else. You can also do that only if it will work in the current context of the program that you are doing. If it's not fitted to actually if it's not fit to be in the switch case, or sorry, in the if statement like this, else, if it can't work, then don't do it. You can put a switch statement on its own and it'll also be fine. Okay, cool. So here, let me just quickly fix all these errors before I can explain it to you. I don't like explaining if there's red lines. Okay, delete that. Okay, I'm removing this because winnings and losses, it's redundant. You can just say plus the value that you want. Okay, cool. All right. So switch statements, a new principle that you just learned this week in your lectures and in your practical sessions. A switch statement is very powerful. It's also very easy if you are testing a single value. In this case, we are testing if something is equals to the variable sum that we calculate here. So sum equals dice 1 plus dice 2. So example, if dice 1 is 2 and dice 2 is 3, then it's 5. Then this sum will be 5. So switch statement tests if the sum is equals to a certain number. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly comment here, do switch statement to test for specific sum results. Okay, so in this case, we want to see if this sum is equals to 3. So what I explained in my practical classes is that this is not a case of, sorry, mind the pun, this is not a case of having an order like case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That number literally means that you are testing if the sum is 3. And that number here is literally if you test if the sum is 7. And we can go on. If we test here in this case if the sum is 9. And lastly, we test in this case if the sum is 11. So this is not a numbering initiative or whatever you use to number cases or anything. That 3 there that I'm highlighting now is literally the value that you test if it's equal to this sum. All right. So let's go through it. So let us comment here and say if the sum value is equal to 3. So then if it's true, do this. If you throw 2 dice and the random values of both add up to 3, then you win 1,000 rand. Okay, so that's basically what this bit of code here is doing. Okay, so add 1,000 to the cumulative winnings. Oh man, this might be spelled wrong, so please don't judge me on that. Let's just say pot winnings. All right, cool, sweet. Moving on. All right. Another important thing, you need to actually always put this break, that break keyword after your initial processing. what that means is, okay, cool, so you just added 1,000 to your total, whatever that was or is. Then you need, if it's finished, if the case is done, then you need to say break. The break ends whatever is being done inside that case, or if that case is true, then if whatever you did or are doing or is whatever you're doing, always put the break at the end to let C# know, okay, cool, I'm finished with this case now, let's move on to the next one. All right, as we are doing in this case now. All right, cool. As I explained in this, basically a switch statement is repeat, repeat, repeat. Not always, but in this case, it's repeat, repeat, repeat. Okay, cool. So let me just say this: if the sum value is equal to 7. So as I explained, now you throw 2 dice and it's a 3 and a 4. Add it together, you get 7. If the sum is equals to 7, then you lose 10,000 Rand. Alright? That's why I have this subtract minus in between it. And to display, okay, cool, so total equals total minus 1,000. Oh, another cool thing that you learned this week is instead of writing total equals total minus that, you could have also said that. So that is basically the same as saying total equals total minus 10,000. This is very, it's at first it's confusing, but at later stages you try and find the least amount of typing that you can do to actually solve a problem. So if you are lazy and you don't want to type a lot, or you are against time in a practical test, you can do this. Alright, it's the same thing, you're going to get the same result. Cool. Moving on, and you can see another break here because we are finished with this case processing at this stage. Alright, moving on. I'm gonna comment these or copy these comments to save you guys time and bandwidth. Alright, okay, so in this case, if it's 9, and in this case, if it's 11. Cool. So, as I explained, if the sum is equals to 9, do this. Alright, and as I also explained, you can also do this, which means ultimately total equals total plus 5,000. Okay, so if you have 9 and you throw 2 dice and it's a 4 and a 5, add it together, you get 9, and then yay, cool, you win 5,000 Rand for throwing 2 dice. Cool. Who said gamble isn't fun, right? Alright. Lastly, we are checking if the two numbers added together is 11. If you throw a 5 and you have a 6 and it's 11, you win 10,000 Rand. Cool. So that is a switch statement. So that's how we use it in this case. Alright, and there's a break because we are finished. As you can see, we didn't use a default case in the switch statement, but we can. So we can say total equals total plus 0. Break. Cool. So what this is, it checks, okay, cool, so if it's not 3, 7, 9, or 11, then just plus a 0. So initially it does nothing, okay? But in some other cases where you use switch statements, the default is pretty handy. There's too many examples that I can think of now to actually explain it to you fully, but we're against time, and yeah, it's not necessary to explain it to you now. It's explained in your lectures, and I also think they are going to go through it in your lecture videos. Alright, moving on. As you can see, you want to show your current accumulative winnings. Okay, and to do that, we have a disabled text box, meaning in its properties, you just set the enabled property to false. Okay, I think all of you need, by this stage, you probably know how to do this, but let me just quickly show you for the fun of it. Okay, cool. Enabled, you can see there, and it's set to false, meaning that you can't edit whatever value is in it or yeah, is in it during runtime. Cool. So at the end, we want oh yeah, sorry. This use text box is named text winnings. Okay, cool. And then you assign the total in the end. You assign the total, whatever it is, if it's 0 or 100,000 or a million or 3 million or whatever you won or lost, you add that value or assign that value to that text box so that the user can see on the fly as he or she clicks, what he is winning or losing. All right, cool. So guys, that's it. I can quickly test it for you just to show you that the code actually works. I hope it works now. Cool. All right. Yes. Okay. So I made a picture box with two dice in it, and if I click it, it's 5 and 1 because, and it's 0 because 6, the sum of 6 doesn't give you anything. Okay, cool. Now I can see 5 and 4. Alright, let's scroll down. 5 and 4 is 9. Great. So the total equals, okay, so previously the total was 0. Now you take that total, which was 0, and you plus 5,000 to it, and now you are 5,000 Rand richer. Okay, cool. We can continue. Oh, okay, wow. So 2 and 5 is 7. Alright, so that's should be then, okay, so minus 10,000. Okay, cool. Let's continue. Alright, okay, cool. 2 and 2, right? Now we have label 1 and label 2 is the same, 2 and 2, and you just won 100,000, so it was minus 10 plus 100,000 gives you 90,000. And then you can go on and click, 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 and play around with it. But yeah, okay, cool, guys. This was your Practical 5 Exercise 1. I really hope that you understand this more clearly after this video. Thanks for watching, and yeah, check you next week. Cheers.